is they say, diabetes runs in my family. Does it actually run in your family, or do poor diet and lifestyle strategies run in your family? So, and we see that a lot. Kids, they eat the way their parents did. They exercise the way their parents did. Kids, I mean, they're modeling after you. I don't have kids, but for those of you that are parents, that's huge. So it's not actually in your DNA. It's just in your lifestyle that you're passing down.
What if I told you that the same mindset that builds championship teams also builds an extraordinary life? The same discipline that drives elite performance to greatness is the discipline that unlocks a longer, stronger, and more resilient future. This is where peak health meets peak performance, where we explore the science of longevity and the mindset of greatness. Because your legacy isn't just what you leave behind, it's what you show up with every single day. This is the Legacy and Longevity Podcast. I'm Zach Dancel, your host. Welcome back to the Legacy and Longevity Podcast. This show is where we talk about more than just health, right? We want to help people shift the mindset of really becoming CEOs of their own health and their future. Because longevity is not just about living longer, but it's about living better, with energy, with purpose. I think there's a lot of times, if you've ever felt, where you're foggy, inflamed, and hormonally off, people are starting to kind of accept this as a new normal when they shouldn't. And today's guest is someone who didn't just study health, but, she also had to fight for her own, right? Because she also battled that herself. Renee Belz is a certified nutrition consultant, a holistic lifestyle coach, a biohacker who was able to rebuild her body from the inside out, where she dealt with chronic fatigue and hormonal dysfunction and mercury toxicity and chronic viruses, where she's also a co-host of Biohacker Babes. So for those who don't know about that podcast, I advise that you check it out. I also had her sister on a couple weeks ago. It runs deep in the family. So Renee, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's such an honor to be on.
No, of course. I always like to start where it all began, right? To me, it's not about credentials. It's more so about the context. And I think, everybody comes from, has their own path where they either had someone very close or, themselves who faced, a obstacle in the health space. So kind of talk to us a little bit, kind of like where it started for you and where your mind shifted of, I need to really, take control of this and do my own thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I think most of us practitioners get into the space for that exact reason, whether it was a personal issue or a family member or a friend. We all are seeking answers that maybe traditional medicine isn't providing us. So my story kind of really starts all the way back in childhood. I know you had my sister on. I'm not sure if you had my dad on yet, but he's been a biological dentist since 1985. So I grew up with holistic health. I thought it was the norm to, when you had an injury, use some red light therapy and take some arnica. I didn't realize until college that that's not the norm in America. And so that really set the stage. And then when I graduated from college, I ended up in complete burnout. I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. And traditional medicine looked at my labs, and we've all heard this story, right? Your labs look great. And I'm 22 years old, sleeping 12, 13 hours a day, saying, there's something wrong with me. I do not feel well, especially in my early 20s where you would think we'd be thriving. I thought I was eating well. I thought I was doing somewhat of the healthy things. Clearly, I was missing a lot. And so that led me down the path of, I went back to my dad and said, where should I be looking? And I started talking to practitioners across the entire holistic health spectrum, running different labs, trying to figure out. And really, it was a lot. It was, poor blood sugar control. It was adrenal dysfunction or HPA axis dysfunction. It was Epstein-Barr virus reactivation, heavy metal toxicity, poor circadian rhythm. I mean, it was all these things, but, traditional medicine would have probably just been like, that's a bunch of quackery. What are you even talking about? But yeah, and actually when I got mono, that was really like the final point of like, okay, now you're in bed 12, 13 hours a day because you weren't listening to us. We were telling your body all these signs and signals and you weren't listening. You get mono, here you go. Now you're in bed. And so that kind of forced me. I had to look for answers. At that age, I was not willing to just accept what my traditional doctor said, which was, you just need to sleep more. I mean, that's just comical. Yeah. And then I became really passionate about nutrition. I ended up going back to school. I got my master's in nutrition. And from there, I just kept looking. I'm like, nutrition is definitely a big part of the pie, but there is so much more. And that's where, full health optimization, functional medicine, biohacking, all of that brings this beautiful picture into play. And so I'm grateful that I was able to figure all the things out. I had access to a lot of great practitioners. This was almost 20 years ago where we didn't have, YouTube and podcasts. It was a lot harder to find the information. But I ended up working with clients for the last 15 years because I really wanted other people to know there are other answers. So even if you hear that your labs are normal, and I know Nava does a great job of that. I know when I worked there, I was one of the OG Nava employees,
Yeah,
2013.
fun fact, Renee was one of the OGs that really helped us launch Nava and what we've been able to take it today. So, like I said, it runs deep in her family as well it does ours, where she was part of the very beginning.
Yeah, yeah. I just immediately loved what you all were doing, and it was an honor to be a part of that. Because when I worked there, I heard that all the time from patients. Oh, but my doctor said my labs are normal, and then we look at the Nava labs, we're like, oh, there's a lot happening here, but we can help you. So
Yeah. No, I think, it happens all the time, right? Where people constantly dismissed, misunderstood, misled, where, you know, traditional medicine isn't set up for optimal health, right? People think that the system's broken, but I say all the time that it's not broken. The system is set up to run exactly how it does, right?
exactly.
Um, and you can't get a business that big, that large, that successful, where these are some of the largest industries or corporations in the world, and driving more and more profits every year if it's broken, right? It's getting the results exactly what they expect for it to get, right? More profits, um, driving more for their investors, because that's, it's just the world that we live in. It's
Yeah.
a great business model for them, but it's not a great business model for us, right? Your consumers, the people who are truly trying to, live a better life and optimal health. So, just let's kind of talk a little bit more about that. Why is it that the traditional medical system doesn't know, what we're getting ready to talk about, the benefits of sleep, the benefits of HRV, nutrition, where's the gap?
Yeah, I mean, all of that is not taught in medical school. I think if they were to teach it, medical school would probably be 15 years long and no one would go into practice. They would just be in school their whole lives. But you're right. But traditional medicine, they are great at what they do. Like my husband needed his appendix out last year. I am so grateful that there was a hospital 5 minutes down the road, in and out procedure. He's doing great. Like, thank goodness we live in a country where we can get medical care fast and great for emergency situations. But that's what they're taught. Um, and unfortunately, and especially with how toxic our environment is today, the US, we are one of the most unhealthy countries because our food supply, our toxins are out of control. There's a lot, we're overly stressed, we're not sleeping. And that's what's causing all these chronic issues, and a lot of people are kind of just surviving every day, right? They're not to the point where, oh, I need to go to the hospital and get my leg amputated, but they're just like, I got brain fog, I'm tired, I'm moody, gas, bloating. It's all these just kind of nagging symptoms that people push through. But I think people think that that's what they're supposed to do because their spouse is going through it too. Their coworkers going through it too. They think it's quote unquote normal just because it's common. But
Right.
we got to get the message out there that we can have optimal health. It is possible in this world. We just have to seek the other practitioners. Like I'm not going to go to a functional medicine doctor if I need my appendix out. I'm going to go to them for all the other things.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think to your point, right, it's there is a place for traditional medicine, right? It is great for acute care. It's great for, emergency surgeries, something, something, that's very urgent like that, where, you might need an antibiotic to handle some sort of, co-infection, or, bacteria overgrowth, whatever it might be, right? Where they do play a part, but in terms of what should take priority, right? When we know that we can be proactive and preventative and prevent, 80 to 90% of the chronic diseases that are plaguing the country, that's the doctor that you should be going to first, right? Where we can make those take make those interventions early on, to increase your chances to have a more optimal lifestyle, right? If you're not sitting there today at your desk, wherever you're listening to this, and you don't feel just absolutely amazing, you have energy, and you really want to go on and take on the world, and not to say that you're going to have bad days, right? Everyone's going to have bad days where you might not feel great, you might not have gotten the best night's sleep, but majority of the time, you should feel great, right? And I think that's kind of where you were going at, and what just society has accepted this idea of, okay, I'm aging, I should be feeling worse and worse and worse, when really that's not really the case.
Right. Yeah. I mean, aging, I don't know, it's just a number. I'm
Yeah,
starting to hear from my friends, oh, now I'm 40, I'm 50. Of course this hurts. Of course I feel this way. I'm like, 40, 50. You guys we're still young. We got a long way to go.
yeah. Or like they're saying that, like, wait till you get my age, and I'm just like, yeah, I can't wait till I get to your age, because I'm going to be doing all the things to make sure that when I am your age, right, I'm not having those issues, right? It's
Yeah.
again, it's going back to just really becoming the CEO of your own health, right? And being okay to, start questioning and asking questions to the system, right? To providers. Like, this platform was really to help people, gain more knowledge, more information, so that they could be curious, right? It's okay to ask your doctor questions, right? They aren't the end all be all, right? They are there to help assist and guide you and make recommendations on what they feel is most appropriate for you, but not to say that's going to be the best, right? You have to become the CEO, and you have to take control, similar to what you did when you had your issues, right after college and becoming burnt out. And I think that's kind of what leads into, like, the next point that I think a lot of people, and especially the traditional medical system, don't have, is this, the talk around the bioindividuality, right? This concept that flies in the face of the cookie cutter wellness industry, right? Is that we need to be personalized. We need to treat everybody one of one. So kind of talk to us a little bit more, um, how you define that in the health space.
Yeah, and again, traditional medicine, they don't have time for the bio individual part. I get that. They have 5 minutes with a patient. You are living in your body 24/7. You're going to know your body better than anyone else, even a functional medicine practitioner that maybe takes 90 minutes to sit down with you. So really, I think we have to, like you said, we have to be the CEO of our own health. So it starts with you. You need to be tracking. Like, I am a big biohacker collect data fan. I think tracking things so that you can realize what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Because when we look at bioindividuality, we love saying that word. We're looking at genetics, gender, age, gut microbiome, hormones, epigenetics. There are so many factors. And my sister Lauren and I, we're 2 years apart. We're pretty similar genetically, but even we have to do things differently to optimize our health. So if we have to do it differently, you can only imagine how different it is from that Instagram social media influencer that's selling you some drink or whatever. So you have to really collect the data on yourself. That's where things like the Aura Ring, Whoop Band, whatever you want to use to collect that. Also doing lab testing. If you're not a practitioner, you obviously need a physician to be ordering your labs and checking your labs regularly. I'm not saying just once a year when you go in for your physical. Like, maybe it's even every 6 months just to get a checkup. It's kind of like checking on the engine of your car, right? You're going to check on that every so often. So yes. And then I think being willing to experiment a little bit, again, that's the biohacking component.
Yep.
I'm not saying if you are not a practitioner and you don't know anything about this industry, you should start, buying peptides and injecting them or something like that. But maybe you just, okay, what do I do? How do I feel if I fast for 14 hours a day? How do I feel if I do this 1 hour before bed? It can be little hacks like that, but you have to notate, whether it's in a journal or an app or collecting data, like whatever works for your personality. But really, that's going to help you fine tune. And then you can take that information to your practitioner and say, okay, this is what I think I'm putting together. What do you think with your expertise? And then they can help, confirm whether you're on the right track or not.
You hit on a lot of points that I think that I love to go down. The first one would be, let's talk about genetics and epigenetics, right? It's a lot of things that I think there's a lot of misinformation around. A lot of people, get told by their traditional doctor that, oh, that's just, that's your genetics. When in reality, what we know on the functional medicine, longevity medicine side, right? Sure, genetics play a part, but it's really a small part, right? So talk to us a little bit more and break down the difference between genetics and epigenetics and how those are influenced.
Yeah. So genetics, I like to think of it as about 8 to 12% of the equation. The rest is epigenetics. And epigenetics are how your lifestyle factors are turning genes on or off. So I think everyone should get a genetic panel. You only have to do it once, and then you have that information for life just to help guide you. So, like for me, for example, I do carry one of the Alzheimer's genes. Some people might be a little scared to find that out. It wasn't too shocking for me. I lost one of my grandfathers to Alzheimer's, so I had a feeling it was in the family. But knowing that information, I am empowered to do all the biohacks, all the nutrition and lifestyle things to help regulate that gene, right? So watching no alcohol, no sugar, prioritizing sleep, prioritizing stress management, things that increase BDNF. I can kind of hone in because I know that and I'm empowered with that information. Now, that's just one gene and one example, but I think where people also get kind of slipped up is they say, diabetes runs in my family. Does it actually run in your family, or do poor diet and lifestyle strategies run in your family? So, and we see that a lot. Kids, they eat the way their parents did. They exercise the way their parents did. They're modeling after you. I don't have kids, but for those of you that are parents, that's huge. So it's not actually in your DNA. It's just in your lifestyle that you're passing down.
Right. So to kind of like what you just said, to summarize it, right? Genetics can give you what you have the potential risks for, right? But your epigenetics, right? Your lifestyle, the things that you eat, how you're moving, your sleep, how you're managing stress, right? That being your epigenetics is going to be able to either turn on or turn off those genes based off of what you're doing every day for your lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. And overall, there's a lot of basics that we all need to do, right? Once you get into really fine tuning your plan with your genetics, but overall, right, we all know we got to eat whole foods, we got to prioritize sleep, we got to manage our stress, like exercise. Everyone has to be doing that no matter what. But once you know your genetics, you can maybe prioritize a little bit more on what you need to focus on. Yeah.
No, and what do you think? What mistakes are you seeing? A lot of people make when they try to, you know, copy the diet or the protocols from influencers instead of truly understanding themselves.
Yeah, I hear it all the time, like, oh, the keto diet didn't work or the vegan diet didn't work. And it's like, well, it didn't work for you, but it does work for someone. Now, I'm not a fan of really restrictive diets. I think they should be used therapeutically. There is a place for the carnivore diet or an autoimmune paleo diet. These are short-term therapeutic diets. I don't think any of us should be on that long term. But we do want to figure out, like, we can optimize our macro ratios a little bit more based off of genetics. But I just don't believe in like very restrictive. But again, if it doesn't work for your body, you're going to write that off and say, well, that didn't work. That didn't work. It
Yeah.
didn't work for you. But the problem with a lot of these influencers, it's so hard because I know it probably comes from a good place. They're trying to help other people. But if they are not practitioners, they are just sharing their N of one experiment. That's just one person that it worked for, versus those of us that are practitioners. We've seen thousands of patients and seen like how broad this range of different therapeutics needs to be. If you really, really resonate with an influencer, maybe you do try something as long as it couldn't be potentially harmful and see if it works, but be willing to know that it may not work for you.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think for the most part, there's a lot of people out there on social media that are doing it with good intentions. But I think that they're somewhat oblivious to just how much bigger and deeper things really go. I think they saw something that really works for them, but they don't know the data, the science. They don't have the experience on the clinical side. Seeing all the people of just how it might have worked for you in that scenario, that instance. But then, if you kind of look back at some of these influencers who are so hardcore and on the carnivore diet, are now coming out and basically switching up, that they're now doing a alternative carnivore diet where they are doing some fiber, they are doing some fats and some fruits. So it's just like, you know, there isn't one diet that is best for everybody. And then going back to, this, it's not cookie cutter. You are a one of one. So there's tools that we can use where there are these diets like the keto, paleo, carnivore that can be used for certain scenarios, certain instances, whether we're trying to lose some weight, whether we're trying to, help heal the gut, whatever it might be, right? But that's all they are. They are tools. They aren't, forever diets. The one thing that is very consistent is that, whole foods, protein, good fibers, it's, that is always going to be consistent, but then how you play with the different diets and calorie restrictions and intermittent fasting, right? Those are all just tools, to help with
Right.
different scenarios. Let's talk about nervous system regulation. I know you're doing a lot with that. Talk to us a little bit, how important the nervous system really is, and how big it plays a part in our overall health.
Yeah, I think the nervous system is really running the show, and a lot of people are overlooking it. They're overriding it, thinking, "Oh, well, this diet or this supplement or this hack will optimize." But if your nervous system is not regulated, you're wasting your money. A lot of that stuff's not going to work, and this goes back to the work uh, regarding the cell danger response, right? If your body is in this fight or flight sympathetic state all the time, that leads to cell danger response. Your cells don't care about whatever nootropic or peptide you're putting in your body. They are in an extreme state of fight or flight. And so, even though my background was primarily nutrition, I started to see people getting so obsessed about everything they ate that the stress, I think, was overriding any potential benefit of this healthy diet. So that's where I kind of went down the rabbit hole of like looking at the nervous system and sleep optimization. I was like, this needs to be before nutrition. I mean, yes, try to get on like a basic whole food diet. Everyone should be doing that, getting rid of processed foods, of course. But at the same time, really looking at the nervous system and what's going on there, because I think people just get like really nitpicky about every little thing they're doing, everything they're eating, and tracking everything. I'm like, you're just burning yourself out. And especially for women, I think men can push through this a little bit more than women. Genetically, we just, through evolution, we need more downtime. We need more down regulation. We need more parasympathetic activity. Women in the tribe weren't out fasting 20 hours a day chasing the next meal, versus men, you're kind of built for that. And so finding more ways to down regulate. And I think using heart rate variability can be a really good way to track what's going on with the nervous system. And it's really great to see so many different trackers for HRV now, Oura Ring, Whoop Band, even the Apple Watch. I don't know how accurate that is. Or you can just get like a heart rate monitor, chest strap, connect that to an app like Elite HRV or Optimal HRV, and really get to know your nervous system.
Before we continue, I want to share something deeply personal, the real reason my family started Nava Health. Over a decade ago, my mom was on her deathbed. Her organs were failing, and the doctors told us there was nothing they could do except keep her comfortable. In that moment, everything changed. We realized traditional medicine had limits. especially when it came to proactive and preventative root cause medicine built for long term health span and lifespan. At Nava Health, we take a data driven precision approach to longevity. We test over 90 biomarkers to uncover exactly what's happening inside your body, and we build a personalized plan designed around your unique biology. Because fatigue, brain fog, weight gain, they're not random, they're signals. And when you listen, your body can heal. This is functional longevity medicine done right, comprehensive, proactive, and built to help you feel and perform your best at any age. Go to navacenter.com and take control of your health today. Now back to the show. For the because I have Apple Watch and I have the Aura Ring, right? I think it's important to think it's a great they're great tools to your point, at least tracking as at least having direction, right? But talk to us a little bit about just the accuracy on some of these devices. Are there ones that are a little bit more accurate than the others? And then how do you utilize that information?
Yeah. So the best way to measure heart rate variability is going to be a chest strap, a heart rate monitor. Now, the tricky thing is the best way to do this is when you wake up in the morning, hopefully before you even get out of bed to go to the bathroom, hopefully you can just grab that strap, put that on, connect it to your phone, and you do a measurement right then. And you would do that every morning. And I know that's hard because people are getting up, they're running to work, they got kids. So to make it easier, that's where something like, the Aura Ring comes in, makes it a
Yeah.
little bit easier. It's not as accurate, but what is really helpful here is the trend. So maybe you wake up and your HRV is 100. Maybe it's not actually 100, but we can look at, well, yesterday it was 80. Today it's 100. The next day it's 40, right? We can look at these trends and say, okay, what did I do the last few days that maybe increased my HRV or reduced my HRV? And I have to say a big confusion around HRV. Everyone wants to compare it to everyone else. Oh, I have a high HRV, you have a low HRV. Doesn't matter. It's a very personal number. It's all about your baseline and your trends. So I like to look at 20%, 40% increase or 20 to 40% decrease. Those are like the big measurements. So 20% increase, you say, what did I do yesterday? Did I do sauna, cold plunge? Did I do some hormetic stress that increased it? Or if it dropped down, say 40% below baseline, okay, put the brakes on, clear your schedule as much as you can. You need to be doing maybe take a nap, breath work, meditation. You're definitely not going to CrossFit that day. Maybe you're not going to that party you got invited to, right? So we
Yeah.
can use these signals to guide us to then prevent that burnout. Because if you saw that drop in HRV and you push through it, I guarantee you in the next couple of days, you're going to get hit by something, a virus, cold, flu, something's going to get you because you tried to override that. So we see that change in HRV before. So it's a great signal.
Right. So HRV stands for heart rate variability. What is the importance of HRV?
Yeah. And so, yeah, if anyone's new to HRV, so it's the variation between each heartbeat. So we actually want variation, which is kind of the opposite of what most people think. You don't want just kind of this monotone HRV. We actually want variation. The more variation, it means you are more resilient to stress. Who doesn't want that? Because we're not going to get rid of stress, right? It's not going anywhere, especially now it's 2026. The world's crazy. Stress is not going anywhere. But if you can be more resilient to that person cutting you off in traffic, or your boss calling you into a meeting and yelling at you, or your spouse yelling at you for not emptying the dishwasher, I don't know, whatever it is, you want to be able to just brush that off. And if you have a strong nervous system and higher HRV and more resilience, you can kind of brush those things off. They don't bother you. And we all know people that are naturally like that, right? Just nothing seems to phase them, so that's the goal for all of us to get to that point.
So for HRV, they're obviously, for those who are new to it and want to put some time and effort and focus into it, um, the goal would be to increase their HRV, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And what would you say is like that ideal? Obviously, everyone, this is an N of one. It's a very subjective, but the healthier individual who has that strong resilience, where is that range for them for HRV?
Number wise or
Yeah, number wise, what should people try to target?
Um, I think again, looking at that percentage, if we can increase our baseline maybe 20%. Now that's going to take time to actually move your baseline. Like you might see a 40% increase on a random day, but long term we're trying to increase that baseline a little bit. Um, Number wise, I mean, I've seen people up to 200. There's thoughts that over 200 is actually not good. But I also see really healthy people that have an HRV of 40. So it's really based off of your trends. But also, once we can improve that HRV, we can then bring in those hormetic stressors to improve it more. So, sauna, cold plunging, fasting, these are great hormetic stressors, but you want to do them on a day where your HRV is strong. Because we're saying, okay, our nervous system is in a good state. Let's stress it on purpose. And then the body's going to adapt and become stronger from it.
Is there what types of exercises or movements can help with HRV?
So zone two training potentially. Anything also with VO2 max, looking at that could potentially help. I don't know if there's any research on like weightlifting or sprints. I would assume potentially some kind of high intensity interval training would help with that. But then again, it's doing that training on the appropriate days.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the whole resilience piece, right? Trying to similar to cold plunge where you're doing something that isn't comfortable, right? You're pushing yourself to do something that you don't necessarily enjoy. I kind of think that's, where some of the um the lifting could come into play. But no, I mean, I love tracking my HRV. Like I said, I have Aura and the Apple Watch. Obviously it's a new thing, just like VO2 max, right? Not new, but it's becoming more of a discussed topic. Being that longevity is becoming you know the big and up and coming buzzword. um Talk to us about VO2 max and what exciting information you have on that side.
Oh gosh, I'm definitely not an expert in that realm, but there's definitely some good research on connecting that with longevity. I think looking at across the board longevity metrics. I mean, VO2 max we know is really important. Grip strength is really important. Even like the sit to stand test. How well can you get up and up off the floor and back down? I think all of those kind of go into like the bucket of looking at longevity. And I haven't actually done the VO2 max test. I hear that it's not fun. Have you done it?
I haven't, but I think I was talking to your dad the other day, and he was talking about. I think they have one in the clinic, but he's about to upgrade to the Pinot,
Oh, yeah, Panoe. I don't know how you say it. Yeah.
Pinoy, however you pronounce it,
Yeah, everyone says
Pnoe,
that's right.
right? Um, but I mean, it's I haven't personally done it. Just to me, it seems like you're gonna run and push yourself to where you're at capacity to really be able to test that. But I think it comes down to it's just one of those. It's another data point, right? Just like how important it is to you know track your labs, track your HRV, VO2 max. Some of these things that are uh, extremely beneficial and predictive in terms of where you kind of fall and on the chart. It's just it gives you that baseline of here's where you started, and kind of like where you need to go from there, right? There's never a time where we should we shouldn't be where we are today, where people are just settling for being sick and not having energy, right? Just continuously to just love life and want to improve, and that continuous improvement of you want to get better every single day, right? And I think all these wearables and tracking metrics. I'm super excited about just you know where we're headed with things and the access that people are being able to get to. But um, also at the same time, I want to make sure that we're reminding people that there's still foundational pillars that doesn't matter. what wearable you have, if you're not focused on those, not much is going to change for you.
Right. We always say basics before biohacks. So don't jump to the fancy tech and the gadgets if you're not doing the basics. The basics are still the foundation. And even with all these data points, like I don't want people to ever feel overwhelmed like they need all these extra things. It's just if you're wanting to take your health to the next level, it can be helpful. And we are seeing a huge movement where all of these are becoming more accessible. They're becoming cheaper. I mean, you could probably just Google VO2 max test near you, and you could probably find someone. You could do it tomorrow, or even like the Oura Ring or CGMs, continuous glucose monitors. I mean, how exciting is that? You don't even need a prescription to get that anymore. Versus 5 years ago, you were fighting some doctor like, please give me one. So a lot has changed in accessibility, which is exciting.
Yeah, no, it really is. But let's go back to the importance of the nervous system, and just like the regulation. What other than HRV, what are some of the other things that we can really assess? Where our nervous system, stands today, and like what are like your non-negotiables on what people can do today, to start improving that.
Yeah, I think other metrics that are really helpful, I would say one is respiratory rate, which you can see on a lot of wearables. Again, not 100% accurate, but seeing the trend. I find Oura Ring is pretty close on respiratory rate, but a high respiratory rate is a really good sign that your nervous system is not regulated. You're probably living in a more sympathetic dominant state most of the day. And now respiratory rate on like an Oura Ring, it's looking at how fast you're breathing per minute while you're sleeping. A great goal here is 13 to 15. So if you are upwards closer to maybe 20, your body is really stressed while you're sleeping. And when we're sleeping, that's when we're doing our repair, our rejuvenation. We're detoxing the brain with the glymphatic system. A lot of beautiful things are happening during sleep. But if you're breathing 20 times per minute, your body's way too stressed to be doing repair. It's just kind of trying to get through the night. So respiratory is really great. But then, okay, so say you have a high respiratory rate, what do? The number one thing I think you could do here is something called HRV biofeedback. It's a type of breath work where you are measuring your HRV in the moment using an app like, I really like Optimal HRV. So again, bioindividuality. So a lot of people are jumping on the breathwork bandwagon, but are you doing the right breathwork for your body? So HRV biofeedback, it's telling you exactly how to breathe in the moment based off of your HRV. And so like for me, my resonance, we call resonance breathing, is 4 breaths per minute. So during the day, I'm training my body to breathe 4 breaths per minute. And how you breathe during the day is typically how you sleep at night. And I think, and there's so much to unpack with sleep. I think people are waking up to the fact that, oh, okay, I need 8 hours of sleep. Oh, okay, blue light is bad. There's a couple things, but there's so much more that goes into sleep. And I think the nervous system and how we breathe is a huge piece. So respiratory rate's a good one. The other one I would say is deep sleep. Again, the trends are really helpful, but if your body is in a stress state all day long, it doesn't just shut that off when you get into bed because you say, okay, it's bedtime. Your body needs a lot of signals to say, we are safe. It's okay. Because if you think about like evolution, when we go into deep sleep, we're out, right? We're out like dead to the world. Not a good time for the other tribe next door to attack your tents, right? Like through evolution. So if we're not safe, we're not going to go into that deep restorative sleep. So we have to send all the signals, which includes HRV biofeedback, the right breath work, down regulation, meditation, mindfulness, whatever works for your body to say, hey, we're safe enough to go into this really important phase of sleep. So yeah, respiratory rate and deep sleep are really good to track.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that I think deserves a little bit of time and attention. That for those who might not know, but the difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic states. Just talk to us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah. So those are the 2 branches of the nervous system. So sympathetic, we like to call fight or flight or flee. That's we're on this podcast right now. We're both in a little bit of a sympathetic state, right? Our brain is pumping. We're on it. Parasympathetic is what we call like rest, digest. That's repair, sleep. Now, both branches are always working. You're never just sympathetic or just parasympathetic. It's kind of like this seesaw action. But humans were not designed to be in a sympathetic fight or flight state all day long. That's like, again, I love always looking at like, well, what did our ancestors do? Granted, they weren't living to 120 probably, but overall, we can learn some of the things from history where like maybe they were in sympathetic 10% of the day, right? When they were chasing after their next meal, or they were in battle, maybe they were in a famine because they couldn't get enough food. There were times where sympathetic saved their lives. Very important. But here in 2026, we're in sympathetic all day long. Every time someone calls you or your phone pings you, you got an Instagram alert or email alert, every input, music, sound, your kids screaming, that's all inputs that are causing that sympathetic state.
You said kids screaming?
Kids screaming. You don't know anything about that, right?
Well, my sympathetic might be up there now. I'm just kidding. That it's but no, yeah, I mean you have a good point, right? All these different inputs that people aren't truly you know clear or in understanding of just what the potential damage of being so connected all the time can do, whether it's your phone, your watch, your wearables, the sounds are just around you, right? It's very vast that I don't think people truly understand. That it kind of opens up their eyes, right? But is there a healthy do we know if there's a healthy teeter, or is it truly based off of the individual of how often we should be in sympathetic versus parasympathetic?
Yeah, I don't know that we know like an exact number of what's ideal, and we're not going to get rid of all of that. But there are a couple things you can do, right? Put your phone on do not disturb mode. That is a huge, easy biohack right there. Just not getting pinged all day long. Obviously depends on your job and situation, but if you can do that, that's a huge one. But I think in today's world, what we do need to do more is carve out time specifically for that parasympathetic activity. Even just 2 minutes, close your eyes, silence, not even music, nothing, and just close your eyes and do a couple of deep breaths. Or if you can do a therapy, hyperbaric, PEMF, red light therapy, all of these are great. Obviously because there's scientific research showing the benefits of those, but also you're typically not on your phone. You're not being bombarded by anything. You're probably in a parasympathetic state. So scheduling those things are so important in this crazy world.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree, right? You got to find that healthy balance, and I think that healthy balance really comes down to where you feel and operate your best, right? But sympathetic is helpful when you're escaping danger or lifting heavy weights, or you know performing at a high level temporarily, like we're doing with this podcast, right? But if you're just chronically in that state, right, that's where chronic fatigue, insomnia, anxiety, it can wreck your hormones, it can wreck your gut, that people don't understand just how deep this chronic sympathetic dominance can really lead to, and just how serious it can get. Just how, like, I think people, obviously that's stress, right? People don't understand that stress can actually kill you, right? And they don't think much of it, and they're constantly in that state, versus where they do need to really take the time to be in that parasympathetic state where you might be obviously resting, meditating, yoga, doing breath work, because that is where our bodies are able to heal, right, and to repair and rebalance our hormones and regenerate healthier mitochondria, right? So it's finding that healthy balance. It's to your point, there's not enough information to say here's how often each one, but it's that one of one that you were saying. At least try everything once, because what might work for you uh, isn't going to work for the next person, but it could be a game changer for you.
Right. Yeah, and I've never met anyone that didn't need more parasympathetic time. I can just say pretty much everyone needs more, whatever that more means. And also, this is where biohacking tech can be really helpful, because everyone is tight on time. I hear this all the time from parents. They're like, I don't have time to do 30 minutes of breath work. Okay. Do you have 5 minutes where you can put on a vagus nerve stimulator or something like the brain tap device, which is using light and sound to balance the brain, the right and left brain hemispheres? Using that tech where that 5 minutes is like you did an hour of just laying on the bed, right? So that's where the time hacks can be really helpful.
Do you have a brain tap?
I do. I've had one for almost 7 years and I'm still obsessed with it.
Yeah, I have one right in my lower cabinet in my office that I'll pull out every now and then to get into one of those. I mean,
Nice.
it's crazy just to what that short period of time, and when you like come to just the difference of prior to after. I mean, it's those types of
Yeah.
things. It's I don't know. I mean, I think to your point, there are these little biohacks that make a big difference that people, I think, get very afraid when you say the word biohack or longevity, because their first thought is, oh, you got to have a lot of money to be a biohacker, or to be someone who talks about longevity. When in reality, if you're talking about the basics, right, really doesn't there isn't much cost, right? How you manage your stress, um, your sleep, right? How you prioritize sleep, eating whole foods diet, right? Where you're eating foods that are more satiating than ultra processed foods, and just movement, right? So it's like I love talking about this, and talking to people who try to bring that up, and battling that objection, because in reality, it's the basics that are going to make the most impact. Don't cost much of anything.
Totally. Totally agree with that. And look at the blue zones, right? Where there's a large percentage of centenarians. They're not biohacking, but
No.
they're in sunshine, they're walking, they're eating food that was probably picked from less than a mile from their house. They're socially connected.
Yeah.
If you can do that, then great, throw out all the gadgets. But I don't know most people living in America today that can live that lifestyle. So that's where you bring in the hacks to balance that if you have the money. If you have the money, but the money to a device can save you time. So it just depends. What do you have more of, time or money?
Yeah. What just continuing to hit on the nervous system regulation. What are the non-negotiables when it comes to nervous system regulation?
Yeah, I think, circling back to using HRV to decide when to push and when to slow down. So, like the low HRV days, if you do slow down and listen to your body, you're going to feel so much better the next couple days versus if you're like, oh, it's just one workout, I'll just push through. I'm telling you, that workout is not worth it. And then on the higher HRV days, using those days to really test your limits, push your body to the max. Your body will adapt on those higher HRV days. And that again is going to create that resilience. And then also, I think non negotiable is find a breathwork practice. I keep bringing up HRV biofeedback. I think everyone should be doing this. You can do just 5 minutes a day if that's all you have time for. I personally do 10 minutes twice a day, but have a little more time. So find what works for you. But I think that it's not only training your nervous system, but it's training you how to breathe. And I think we're going to, in 2026, I think more and more people are going to be talking about this. Like hyperbaric has been really popular, right? VO2 max is coming online. CO2 training is going to be huge this year. I think people are waking up to the importance of hypoxia, hyperpoxia, but just how we're breathing is huge, right? And if you think about the hierarchy of what our body needs, what's first? Oxygen. Oxygen is more important than water, than food, than sleep. So I think finding a breathwork practice that resonates with you is a non-negotiable.
Yeah. Do mouth tape? Yes or no?
Oh, yeah, no. It can be helpful if you have been checked and to make sure you don't have obstructive sleep apnea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the problem, and this has happened in the influencer space, everyone's just popping on mouth tape. If you're not breathing through your nose because you have, a deviated septum, or maybe you have infections from dental issues, You're just slapping a piece of tape on the only hole your body has to breathe while you sleep. So what are you going to do to your body? I mean, you're putting your body into an immediately stressful situation. So if you want to use mouth tape, I say get checked. Your dentist can hopefully do that for you just to make sure everything's clear. Because you shouldn't be breathing through your mouth when you're sleeping. So breathing through your mouth is sympathetic. Breathing through your nose is parasympathetic. So you want to be breathing through your nose as much as possible. Obviously, if you're doing a really intense workout and you're in a sympathetic state, what do? You gasp. You want to get oxygen in through your mouth. But training to breathe through your nose is super important. Also for nitric oxide production. Also to prevent you from getting sick. Right? We have these natural air filters in our nose. So if you inhale a pathogen, it can hopefully offset that. Versus mouth breathing, you actually may get sick more often.
I had to ask a controversial question, right? Because I'm not a fan of it, but obviously I see it all online and people talking about it. But I think one of the things that isn't discussed enough by those people who are trying to promote their mouth tape or whatever it is, right, is that they should disclose and make that recommendation that they should go see an expert before doing it, because I do think that that it can be very dangerous.
Yeah, it's kind of frightening. And I will say there's one mouth tape I do really like. Patrick McKeown, who's a breathwork expert, he made something called the Myo tape. And it just looks like a rectangle that goes around. So it's not actually sealing your lips, but it's training the muscles around your lips to sleep with your mouth closed. So if you had an emergency, you could breathe if you need to. So I think if you're going to play with that, I would look his up and try that.
Awesome. All right. Well, I got a few questions before I go ahead and wrap it up. First one is, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Oh man, the best advice I've ever received. I think it has to do with going back to the nervous system. I had an eye-opening experience where I asked to test out this thing called the light portal, which uses light, vibration, sound, binaural beats. It puts your body into a parasympathetic state immediately. When I did that, I realized I don't think I had ever experienced a parasympathetic state. And I was 22 years old at the time. So just learning that it's not normal to be in a fight or flight state all day was a game changer. That's kind of a long answer, but
Yeah. No, I love that. Next one is, what's the biggest problem you are trying to solve in the world right now?
I am trying to spread this message about sleep apnea, airway, respiratory rate issues for women. I'm not sure how I'm going to get this message out, and I'm still figuring it out. So the backstory, why I'm so passionate about this, I was diagnosed with moderate sleep apnea a year ago. And it was very eye-opening because so many doctors told me, there's no way you have sleep apnea. Look at you. You're small, you're thin, you're fit, you're a woman. There's no way you have sleep apnea. I had moderate sleep apnea, which means if I do, how many other women out there are suffering the way I was suffering? And I was doing all the biohacks, right? My whole journey of getting back to normal through all the different things, nutrition, exercise, etc. I was like, there's still something missing. And it was that I had sleep apnea. So yeah, I got to find a way to get the word out there to women that you don't have to be an overweight man with a neck this big that used to play football, right? That typical picture we see of sleep apnea, that is old. Anyone can have sleep apnea. So that's the problem I'm trying to solve.
No, that's awesome. I guess just before we go to the next question, what for someone who does have sleep apnea, what are some holistic functional ways of helping with that?
Yeah, so all the breathwork stuff I've been talking about and really looking at the nervous system, working with a dentist that's trained in dental sleep medicine to get you the right oral appliance to figure out what's actually going on with the airway. Also getting the right sleep study. So finding out, do you have upper airway resistance syndrome, central sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea? There's so many things going on there. And unfortunately, something like the Aura Ring is not going to pick it up. I know they're saying, oh, we'll let you know if we think you need to get a sleep study. Aura didn't pick up anything for me. So I think getting a sleep study is really important. Working with a dentist, looking at breath work. There's different training devices like the AeroFit, where you're actually working on lung capacity so you can breathe better.
Wow. Well, good thing you have an amazing dentist at your disposal.
Yes.
Last question before I close out the episode. When it's all said and done, what do you want your legacy to be?
I don't quite know yet. Something in the health field. And, I always thought legacy just meant, what were you leaving behind for your kids and how you were raising them. And my husband and I actually we're not able to have kids. So it's somewhat of I look at it in a positive way. I was put on this earth for something else. So I'm supposed to mother something else, something in the biohacking space. Maybe it is the sleep apnea thing, but I want to make a difference in people's health. We are in this epidemic. It is out of control. I mean, I'm hearing stats like 50% of kids are going to be obese by 2050. Alzheimer's rates in women are going to triple by 2050. I mean, this is insane. And don't even get me started on the cancer rates. So I know that I am put on this planet to do something in that. I'm still putting those puzzle pieces together, but I want to make a change there.
No, that's awesome. And legacy can be about anything, right? It's could be, what you leave to your kids and your family, but it can also be the impact that you have on others around you, on your spouse, your friends, your family. It can be just, the change, the change that you were able to be a part of, and you were able to help create, and just at the end of the day, right? Leaving the world a better place than how you found it, and making that impact, right? Whatever it is. And I think, you know uh, what you're set out to do, obviously you guys are determined. I love listening to you guys episodes, and um want to where what I really want to do is I want to get to one of the next conferences that you guys are hosting, because you look like you guys have a lot of fun doing that. So
Yeah,
but
it's
no,
a good time.
yeah, we'll have to coordinate that. I'm not sure if you have anything coming up, but we'll talk about that. But Renee, I really appreciate you taking the time. I think these conversations truly matter, right? And I think it's important that we share them. We use our platforms and our voices to be a part of that legacy, right? To create that change, make that impact. There was a ton of information that we discussed that tons of people are experiencing, right? And they're going through it every day, not knowing what they can do. So, hopefully this episode gets to them, and they can, be a part of that change, and they can step up and become the CEO of their health. So to everyone listening, right, remember this, that, your energy determines your presence, your presence determines your impact, and your impact becomes your legacy. So again, Renee, I appreciate you taking the time and speaking to us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You're a great host. I love what you're doing. And to the audience, maybe share this episode with a friend or family member that could use the information. Let's spread the word.
Let's spread the word. Awesome. If today's conversation sparked something in you, here's what I want you to do right now. Pick one strategy, one insight, one small action you heard today, and commit to it this week. Excellence isn't built in moments. It's built in the daily decisions that compound over time. Remember, you're not just building a healthier body or a more successful career. You're building a legacy that will outlast you. And that starts with the standards you set today. Thanks for listening to the Legacy and Longevity Podcast. If this episode was valuable, first subscribe so you never miss an episode. Then leave us a review to help more people find these conversations. And finally, share it with someone who you think needs to hear it. Until next Tuesday, keep raising the bar, keep pushing your limits, and keep stacking days. I'm Zach Dancel. your legacy starts now.